So welcome. We don't have a title for this, but we don't have a brand that unites us per se.
Well, we're
but
a collab, aren't we?
Is this a collab? Okay, so
it's
we're
a
doing a
collab.
collab, like a crossover.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, between I'm Jean from Actual Feminism, and that's Holly, and she's from Feminist Heretics.
Yeah.
But it's probably not her biggest thing that she's known for. She's actually an extremely high-level TERF. Who has made a career of being a TERF.
What does it take to be a high-level TERF, would you say?
Like you have your own website.
Oh, yep. Yeah, no, it's not a TERF website, though. It's just a website of someone that happens to be a TERF.
Okay, well,
subtle distinction.
You are invited to speak at things.
Yep. Sometimes I even go.
Yep. So a bit like at TERF things, not just like
true
at things like, so you are like a known TERF authority, and you have been kicked off Twitter.
Yes, that's
like,
true. That's an honor.
That's a badge.
Yeah. I've been also kicked off Hinge, so maybe I've got 2 honors.
I don't think that is a TERF thing that happens.
Really? Because I'm not the only one, and it was for supporting J.K. Rowling.
Okay, but like heaps of trans people like get kicked off like Tinder and stuff like that.
True.
Apparently that was like a thing for a long time. I'm just saying, like, I'll decide.
Don't exaggerate.
What makes you
okay,
a high level TERF? Okay.
Yeah. It is your party.
And I am I guess not as like high level as you, but like in a different. But I am established in another way. So I'm from the Actual Feminism podcast and making memes, and recently have started posting AGPs on Instagram, which is...
Some would say you're actually a lot more high level in terms of popular success.
Yeah, absolutely. But in terms of like quality content...
I mean, I have been enjoying the content a lot.
So we became... friendly at least. Don't know if we're friends yet.
Gosh, that's a slap in the face.
And started talking. So we both live in Australia, but we don't live anywhere near one another. And we were discussing the possibility of a collab and what we could possibly collab on. And we thought, oh, it'll just come along. What it will be. And we were discussing 2 new books that had been released. So one of them was Deborah Stowe's The End of Gender, and then the other one was Abigail Schrier, Irreversible Damage, the Transgender Craze, Seducing Our Daughters. So we agreed to go away and read them. I guess the original plan had been that we would read one each and then educate one another, but...
I cheated.
Yeah, Holly literally has no self-management and read both of them. So... and she has now written an article, like in the amount of time it took me to just do this one book, she read both and wrote an article about The End of Gender and put it on Feminist Current, which I then read and decided I never wanted to read it. So now we're just talking about Abigail Schrier. Yeah. And you can go and read that article and make up your own mind about whether or not you want to read it. But so
shall we show the book, a mirrored version of the book? It's so cute with this little I guess this is the damage, the irreversible damage.
Yeah, that's where her best parts are, so they've been taken away.
Yeah, so that's not an ideally feminist message in some sense, but...
Sure. and spoiler alert, that will continue throughout the analysis.
We will come back to that issue.
So let's just start a bit with overall impressions of the book. And then we will have a bit of a discussion about like what worked really well, what didn't work well, and then be armchair experts at the end and tell everybody how to do it better.
Yeah, great.
Okay?
Yes.
So what was your overall impression of the book?
I really liked it. She did a really nice job of telling the story and kind of making the case that there's a lot of harm to girls that we should be talking about. And I guess I often feel like in the discussion about gender identity ideology, there's one of 2 stories you can focus on as a feminist. You can focus on the kind of threat posed by men, or you can focus on the, I guess, challenges, issues, and so on for women. And so I liked that she's written a whole book that's focused on the female side of the story, which you just don't normally get that much dialogue about, right? It's usually trans men are invisible and trans women are the whole story. So I thought for a popular audience, she did a really nice job of telling a lot of personal stories, talking to a wide range of people, and then like really explaining what the issues kind of are.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Would agree. My very first impression though was that the title is quite cringe. Like,
that's
and,
so true.
Yeah.
It's the subtitle, right? The transgender craze, seducing our daughters.
Seducing our daughters.
Yeah.
Like, nobody wants their daughter to get seduced. What is this? Like,
that's true. It's a bit hyperbolic.
And I felt like that could immediately be a bit alien to like fence sitters or, you know, the opposition, as it were. But Schrier does take efforts to note that she is an op-ed writer and she is not like an investigative journalist. And I guess that theme was quite noticeable through the book as well. Like, you know, her perspective was in there.
But did you think that the book itself wasn't as clickbaity as the headline? Like that the
it wasn't. It wasn't. It clickbaity. That's exactly.
Because I agree with you. It's like what you would expect from the title is like, oh, this is going to be a kind of just stupid, desperate media grab for attention. But the actual book was quite measured.
I thought it was very easy to engage with, and very easy to consume as a book. I think that anybody kind of could have read it and consumed it and understood it, you know. I thought that her politics were quite obvious all throughout the book, which would be fine for I guess, like, you know, your centrist types and you know, people who are open to thinking critically and engaging with other people's politics, and those people who agree with her, but potentially alienating to other people.
So what did you see as her, what was the impression you got by the end of what her politics are?
She is definitely like towards conservative, on the side of conservative. She definitely places, she's an op-ed writer, she places her opinion throughout it in many ways. Like, she has these kind of strong stances against you know, over medicalizing and I guess like maybe low-key libertarianism. I thought that her politics were obvious all the way throughout, and she's definitely on the side of conservative. I felt like I got quite a good picture of who she is. She heavily identifies as a mother, she heavily identifies as a Jewish woman, she heavily identifies as somebody who is interested in protecting children. She has very strong opinions on things like social media, on medicalization, on like overdiagnosing children, and protecting young women, but I want to get into that one a little bit later because I thought that she had some interesting ideas in that space. One of the things that struck me over and over again, and in our conversations when we were consuming it, I kept saying, like, who do you think like the target audience of this book is? Like, because it was clearly not me. Like, it was clearly not like an entrenched TERF, like a foreigner to America, you know, a feminist of any kind, like. What were your thoughts? Who did you think it was aimed at?
I'm not sure if I agree that it wasn't for a feminist of any kind. I think you're right that there wasn't much new in there for anyone entrenched in the turf wars. So I haven't spoken to anyone from our gang who's read it and kind of gotten much new, because a lot of it is just a kind of, you know, if you've read the Littman paper, you kind of know about ROGD/social contagion trans. You're just getting way more stories about it, right? But you're not getting like more data or anything you can really like do more with. But I guess I sort of thought, because of what I said earlier about how we talk way more about trans women and the kind of various threats to women's rights that poses, I guess I did think that there would be some feminists who, okay, now if they're willing to read it, like, and maybe that's what you're saying, it's not marketed in the way that would catch them, but if they did, I think they might really learn something about a whole fresh side of this debate, like what the challenges are for children, or the sorts of things we might be worrying about on the girls' side of the equation.
Yeah, sure. No, okay. Look, it's not an anti-feminist book
Yeah.
by any means, but it's I don't think that feminism falls into her particular like theoretical guidance, like in how she's approaching it beyond focusing on the well-being of women and girls, which obviously is
a pretty key.
It's a bit of like feminism.
Well, I guess I'm just empathizing with her because I'm like I'm writing a book on a similar topic, and I also chose that angle, like to focus on the harm to girls side of the story rather than the stuff you hear way more about, which is like safety threats posed by men, or So I think I just kind of related to her wanting to tell that story, and it did seem like a good contribution to a feminist project in the sense of caring about telling girls' story and caring about that side of things. But maybe
we've delved into the what works here, like into the what worked about the book and the positive parts about the book. So for you, it was the focusing on women and girls as opposed to men.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that affects the audience question in the sense that like anyone with a broad feminist approach could appreciate the book. Otherwise, it's just aimed at fence sitters, right? Like people who are like, whoa, transgender craze, what? I haven't heard of that. And they just maybe idly pick it up. And then she gets in first.
And people always buy books about things they've never heard of. Like,
just learn something new at the airport.
Yeah, absolutely. I suspect that the audience was, and in terms of when I start talking about like what didn't work, a lot of it is like what didn't work for me, and I think that what didn't work really points to who the audience, like what didn't work for me points to who the audience is, which is like not me. So American people, for one, would probably have gotten a lot more out of it than I did. Mothers, or parents at least, people who, that's not me, and people probably who are less entrenched in the turf wars, for sure, like who have not heard it all before. But in terms of like what worked for the book, broadly, I think it worked, and I thought it was really comprehensive in terms of it covered all of the major arguments, like porn, the popularity of pride, could border on like homophobic, but I really think that did like play a part in it, like pride as a celebration and a community, and that's like a really attractive thing to alienated young people, to who want to be a part of it but aren't homosexual. That's social media, YouTube, they covered all of the like gender critical, all the turf war bigwigs, like Blanchard and Zucker. They discussed like detrans and desisting. Broadly, I thought that it was a really positive thing to do in that it was like kind of this literary narrative companion to Lisa Littman's work. Academic research is not routinely very accessible to the average Jolene, and to write a narrative book about it, about something that has been discovered in research, is a really good way of making those ideas easily accessible.
I think that's right. Sorry.
No, you go.
Oh no, I was just going to say it's kind of interesting in the history of the trans debate how there's been those key moments like that. Like Blanchard's work was buried, but then Michael Bailey wrote The Man Who Would Be Queen, and that like picked it up, and then there was a scandal about Bailey's work, and then Alice Drager wrote a popular book and then blew that up. And so that's just to say I like what you just said in the sense that there are these like buried academic papers, but then there are these ways of bringing them into the popular discussion more. So I think that's a helpful way to think about what the book is doing well.
And I think it did do that. And I mean, in terms of like what could be done more of that, the same thing. I think my favorite chapter, or the chapter that I found most interesting, was chapter 3, which was the influences. I really liked that. So when we were first recording the Actual Feminism podcast, and we were spending a lot of time in Transbook, I started watching a lot of these trans YouTubers, just to get an idea. And whilst I didn't find the content of what they were saying particularly engaging, they're hypnotic to watch. Like, they really are. Like, they're so fun, and the way that it's edited is like all over the place. Like, Chase Russ is a female to male, and I actually found her transition journey a little bit interesting, in that it was on and off and quite reluctant. And I think that Chase Russ is like probably a very deeply unhappy individual, and that does shine through a little bit in terms of the videos, despite this really like bubbly and wacky character that gets put forward. And there's been a few scandals about Chase Russ not being perhaps the nicest person on the planet. And then also the majority in my memory of the content that Chase Russ puts out is like vlogs of her life, where she talks about what she's up to, but then hawking sex toys is the other thing, or talking about sex. And then complains that the content is demonetized because YouTube doesn't monetize mature content, and so moans about being demonetized. And then there's this claim that it's transphobic, and there's a lot of trans YouTubers who seem to be in the same boat, where they're all demonetized, but they all talk about sex all the time, or like sex toys and stuff. And it's like, well,
yeah.
I'm okay with that, actually. Like, I'm okay with that not being something that's broadly encouraged or funded on a public access website, that is accessed by heaps of adolescents.
So what did you like about the chapter?
I just thought it was really well covered. I thought that she summarized the content that trans YouTubers talk about very, very well. And this promise, it's not an unspoken promise in some ways, but a demonstrated promise of this earned happiness that can happen by struggling down this path. And they're all really cute, and they're fun, and they have these exciting lives, it seems, and they are apparently well loved by their fans and the various people they do videos with. I think that would be a very attractive promise to a teenager, a young teenager particularly. Like, watching these people and going, that's like basically what I want my life to be like. I want people to love me and think I'm cool, and I want to have stuff.
Yeah. I think I've already said the things I did like, the focus on girls in general. And then, maybe another thing is that I guess we kind of just know from human psychology that people respond really well to personal stories, right? So I think having that element of like, this person called this, and this was her mum, and this was their story, and then or meeting the clinicians and hearing quotes from the stupid things they say about suicide, and just telling all that in a way that was really human, and made you sort of feel empathetic for the families. And I thought I
thought that the way that it was covered, all the ways that young women are encouraged to pursue this path once they get the idea in their head, I thought that the way that narrative was outlined was actually really good, like from obviously the culture, and then into the school environments and social workers or guidance counselors or whatever in school, and peer influence, and then through to therapists. Like, there's literally nobody you can rely on to help you out of this situation. And that's really good, because parents want to help their kids. They want to do the right thing by their kids, and outlining that you're not going to find a lot of support to try and distract your child from this is valuable.
I can't remember what chapter it was in, but I think she made a really nice point. I think the subtitle was something like there's not a very high cost to social transition, like you could always change back. And I thought she made the point really nicely that like once you actually do that, you've got all this like social stuff at stake. It's really hard to tell people.
But it's counterproductive, because they always tell you, like, if you want to go on a diet or whatever, tell everybody that you're going to do it, because then you feel more compelled to follow through. So we actually know that social transition, or like making a social declaration about a massive change, is not a minor thing. Like, it's a psychological tool to commit yourself to making change.
Yeah. And it's humiliating to tell people you were wrong, or to tell people, God, I know I was really controlling about which pronouns you should call me and what, but I was actually wrong. It's like, that's, of course, people are just
Massive.
out of pride going to get locked in, right? So I thought she made that point really nicely.
Okay. Are we done saying nice things now? Can we just go
I think
on
so.
to...
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm just going to start with the first one because it was literally the first thing in the book. The American-centric attitudes in it. I am now at a stage where, and this is, about me, but even American politics, like there's a part of my brain that just tunes out, and I don't want to know. She kind of mentions other countries throughout it, but then routinely fixes on the issue as an American one in a way that I found unnecessary and quite short-sighted. And then there was these random injections of patriotism in there. Right off the bat, like she opens with this, like her ode to the First Amendment and how much she loves the First Amendment and free speech. I'm like, okay, like, thanks for that. For me, it's almost like, my distaste for all things American centrism, like American centric now, like is always like it's a low key like trigger for my rejecting it. So I did have to. That was a thing I had to contend with working through this book. In chapter 1, there was these like a strange comment in chapter 1, the girls, and she's talking about this Gayatri who is transitioning, and she's the daughter of two like Indian expats who are quite successful, and they are talking about when Gayatri was invited to attend a leadership camp, and they were like, oh yeah, okay, like the parents were like, okay, and then this quote is just interjected, her dad's quote is interjected there, and it's so strange, like I always had a great appreciation and respect for all the institutions in the United States, starting with the government and the federal nature of everything, the school districts being independent and all that. I don't understand why. Like, are you telling me that it's okay even though he's Indian because he loves the American government? Like, is that the purpose of that sentence, to go in there? Like, I don't. It was very, very strange. And then in chapter 4, there is she talks about she's theorizing about like what has led to the institutional acceptance of pro-trans policies and so on like that. And she's talking about schools, and she uses this example of these various schools that were sued by ex-students for being bullied in the schools, and that this is potentially why the schools have uptaken all of this and implemented it, because they want to avoid being sued for bullying. And I'm like, it doesn't explain to the rest of the world. Like, America's the only country where you can sue your school for being bullied. Like, like that would just never carry in Australia or the UK. So even though she wasn't mentioning American politics there, her perspective was a very narrow one. I felt. The next one that annoyed me a little bit, I felt throughout it, and I did say this before, the way that she identifies and sees herself was very clear, and that is very much as a mother, and to some degree I felt that the book did lack empathy for teenagers, and how a teenager might perceive the world. Although that was intended to be explored in relation to trans, it wasn't explored in relation to other things. There were multiple examples where, when interviewing the parents, they're talking about them continuing to financially support their child despite them detracting into gender deviance, maybe, like, and that we're continuing, and they're not talking to us, but we're continuing to pay for their rent, so obviously our money is still good. And it's
I noticed that.
I mean, I that was very much framed in a way that was meant to seem like the kids sound like they're like selfish or ungrateful or whatever, and it's a pretty tired trope about like teenagers and young people. You're the parent, you're meant to do that. That's you're meant to like facilitate them growing up, even if you hate what they're thinking about stuff, like and when you don't do that, you're the asshole, like and that did annoy me. I felt that anybody who kind of has a real like an invested sort of understanding of the adolescent mind and the adolescent perspective would know that would just, those arguments are not going to carry with teenagers. Or like, you know, we're paying for you, so you have to do what we say, basically.
But do you mean more in terms of the audience? Like, it's weird that she expected people to be resonating with her as a mother rather than... Because it sounds like you were sort of empathizing sometimes more with the kids.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, but then I guess it just comes back to the audience question, right? Like, was she expecting to be writing for young people wanting to learn more critically about trans, or was she writing for this, like, middle-aged American fence sitter with political capital? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I did...
That's exactly right.
I didn't clock those things as much, or maybe I actually thought that was reasonable, because I have, like, a quite limited sense of... Like, I think if you're 18 and you're at uni and your parents are still paying for everything, like, that's really lucky, but it's not required. And so it did seem quite a lot to me sometimes when it was like, oh, we're still paying all their things, but they're being like an absolute asshole and refusing to ever speak to us for 2 years because we won't call them Clive or whatever. You know, just seemed like, yeah, I don't know. So maybe I was empathizing in the older direction.
Don't get me wrong, I get it, and I can see why you would be annoyed about it, but it's just not very persuasive from the perspective of the adolescent.
Okay, we're getting to the main thing. I think. So
the
bodies.
thing that I hated the most, women's bodies. Hate them.
Aren't you a lesbian?
Okay, well, I just hate that body.
Take it back. I love them.
I love them so much, and that's why I hated all of these parts of the book that I'm about to talk about.
Yes.
There was some very strange conservative attitudes towards, like, feminism and female sexuality and young women's bodies that just continually jumped out. And some of them were examined, like, quite up close, and other ones were just, like, one sentence that was, like, a little throwaway, and I was like, pause, what? Like, what did you mean by that?
Give us an example.
I am going to give you some examples.
Wonderful.
You fucking ready?
I'm ready.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
Spoiler though, I've already heard them, but I'll try to act surprised or shocked as appropriate.
So in chapter 1, the girls, Schrier is talking about a young lady by the name of Amanda from her school who...
Why did you say school like that?
Was trying to sound, like, educated. Did it
work?
Oh,
really? School?
Did it work?
Really strange.
Thank you.
Really threw me off, actually.
I'm in the program. I'm about to fucking drop a banger, so this is going to be good. So she's talking about Amanda, who is a young woman from her school who was in her friendship group, who was... she sounded like she had been sexually abused, but Schrier didn't say that. But Amanda talked about sex a lot and would practice French kissing with other girls. And this quote really got me. She glorified frivolous sexual encounters. She encouraged many of us to experiment before we were ready. She discouraged condom use. Boys don't like them. Insisted sex was no big deal, and never mentioned the emotional toll that a girl so often pays for a casual sex encounter. The sinking feeling that a protective amulet has slipped through her grasp, lost for good.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Let's dig deep.
Yeah. So the protective amulet is her virginity.
Virginity or her reputation? I don't.
Or reputation, right?
Yeah, access to her vagina is somehow. Yeah, maybe that it is a virginity amulet. Yeah, lost for good. You can't get that back, right? So.
I mean, it's tricky, right? Because it takes us right into like the feminist sex wars. I mean, because on the one hand, you've got I don't want to be even saying anything ever about respect or you know, I just want everyone to be as sexually liberated and having as much fun as possible, and anything else is prudery. Whereas, like, I don't know. I remember this was this really nice scene in Glee, like one of the early seasons, where it was Kurt, the gay kid, and his dad. And the dad did that kind of conservative American speech. It was like, just be really mindful about who you choose to sleep with, because you give a part of yourself away and you can never get it back. And like, there was a sense in which that message was repugnant, because it was like very sexually conservative. Like, having sex is giving something of yourself away, and it's very meaningful and loaded. But there was also something like you could understand the sentiment in, right? Which is like, maybe this good is more valuable when we're more sparing with it. And
Yeah.
like that's a reasonable disagreement, right? Like,
look, I don't disagree. And one of the things that always struck me in all of my complaints, and the reason I've taken such long quotes out, is because she says, she's like making good point, and then it's like, oh, okay, that's a funny way to to bring that up.
Yeah.
The sinking feeling that a protective amulet has slipped through her grasp, lost for good. Do all the emotional toll that a girl so often pays for casual sex encounter, but I mean, girls pay emotional tolls for non-casual sex encounters as well. Like, I don't think that that's limited to the sex itself. It's limited to trying to have a relationship with a young man under patriarchy is where the emotional toll comes in. And obviously there is sex that is damaging and upsetting and does take things away from young women, but say that that's limited to casual sex for me was or is it just the amulet thing I hate? I don't know,
because I feel like there is a point to be made probably about the effects of very casual sex.
Absolutely.
I mean, separate of, like, of course you're right that there's just questions about sex under patriarchy or heterosexual relationships. But I think if the point she's trying to make is just like, there was this girl that was encouraging us all a lot before we were ready, and there are these kind of very like testosterone-filled teenage boys that are just wanting to like get their rocks off.
I don't think anybody should have sex with them, like including teenage girls. I don't think anybody should be having sex with those boys.
But I guess
I agree with that.
If she's trying to make the point that like you can easily be used and discarded, and that can have an emotional toll different of the kind that there is when you're just in a normal relationship, that seems like a fair point to make, right?
It is a fair point to make. That sentence did make me stop though.
The amulet thing is weird. I agree.
Yeah, it's weird.
Well, just maybe on that broad theme, right, of her attitudes towards women and women's
bodies.
My
next 4 quotes are all about that.
Okay.
Like, that was the thing I took away that I disliked the most.
Okay.
I've really gone to town. So get ready. The next chapter 2, the puzzle. So this is where she's talking about her interview with Lisa Littman, and she's going and talking her interview with Lisa Littman. And this is after describing what Lisa Littman looks like. She has brown eyes and tortoiseshell glasses, in case you're wondering.
I was, so...
So Schrier says, she refused my prodding to theorize beyond the limitations of her data, declining invitations to speculate what is in the culture that has led American teenagers to go down this road. I invite Dr. Littman to speculate about the increased popularity of Pride events, the shock of once Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn, beloved Olympian, strapped in a bustier on the cover of Vanity Fair, eyeing the camera hungrily. I wonder aloud if inflated collegiate sexual assault statistics haven't scared adolescent girls off womanhood entirely. Sorry, what?
What?
Is that true?
Say the last bit again?
I wonder aloud if inflated collegiate sexual assault statistics haven't scared adolescent girls off womanhood entirely.
So she's just saying because there's exaggerations in the rape statistics on campus, women are trying to get out of being girls at all.
Are there exaggerations in the rape statistics?
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, Christina Hoff Sommers talks about her whole shtick in her Who Stole Feminism book is like the fake stats of the feminist movement.
Okay.
I think it's about 10, 15, maybe even 20 years old, though I would have to check. So I think she goes to town on sex assault statistics, specifically on campuses, because lots of campuses had these dedicated feminist call centers, but they would get no calls. So she did like a big debunking of that. And then she also debunked the domestic violence statistic, which apparently had gotten up to like 1 in 4 women or something. So it depends when that claim is being indexed to, and it probably depends on the campus, but I don't think that's a crazy thing to say.
Really?
There is a general feminist And that's campuses, right? That's not rape statistics in general. She's talking about college campuses.
She's not. She doesn't say campuses, but college sexual assault statistics.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think.
Is that a thing?
I think it's the Somers point was that it's made it into mainstream feminist discourse that these like 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 women have been raped or 1 in 4 women suffer domestic abuse, whatever. Those stats are just way off the actual stats, and somehow they've just become like, you know how in the trans debate it's always like, what is it, like 41% of trans have attempted to commit suicide or whatever.
Sure.
There's these like zombie stats that won't die and everyone repeats them. And I think there is this for...
I don't know what the rate of college sexual assault is, but I feel like it would be pretty high. Or like attempted sexual assault at least, or...
we did an audit. Again, I would have to check the actual spreadsheet, but Melbourne did an audit maybe 3 years ago when I
don't think that Australia would be the equivalent of cultures where they have like fraternities and sports scholarships and various other things that encourage like male superiority and power and control in that way.
It's not like Australian masculinity is a lot better than American masculinity.
No, it's not. But you have to say the culture of American college versus Australian university is pretty different. I mean, and we don't have an awful lot of campus living. There is a bit, don't get me wrong, but it's certainly not. It's not equivalent.
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak with authority until I've rechecked the book and then the year.
Yeah, go recheck it now. Wait. Really, I was like, I was really shocked about that. Okay, I'm willing to accept that if they're talking about 1 in 5 and that's like a number that's quoted heavily, that would be incorrect.
Yeah, I mean, I found the bit that talks about the campus centres. Has date rape in fact reached critical proportions on college campuses? Someone from a media tried to research it and found that campus police log showed 2 rapes being reported in 1990 to college authorities. And then he checked other campuses and found fewer than 1,000 rapes reported to campus security on college campuses in the entire country, which is fewer than 1/2 of 1 rape per campus. So that's like 1990s. And of course you can say underreporting, blah, blah, blah. But this is not police, this is to campuses. And I think they have Title IX, right? Or I don't know when Title IX came in. Maybe it wasn't that early. Anyway, yeah. I can't find the definitive...
Okay, fine. Egg on my face.
Well, not necessarily. Just the question is how way off is she, right?
I don't know. I was just wondering, when it was talking about inflated collegiate sexual assault statistics, I didn't know what those statistics were, but I very rarely heard of inflated sexual assault statistics in my life, as being a thing. But I would believe they're a thing.
Well, yeah, she's only talking about, she doesn't mean inflated according to the authorities, she means feminists, I think. At least that's how I would interpret it from knowing Summer's work, is that feminists, and actually this for me was really interesting because it made me feel less justified in being angry at the trans activists for all their fake news, because I was like, oh, it turns out just in the second wave we were doing that, we were going around saying all these ludicrous things that we hadn't fact checked that turned out to be wildly off the actual numbers. Like the domestic violence stats, and maybe that's just something that when people are passionate and you're short on time to get your research correct, and
or you want to make a billboard, you want to make a poster for your protest.
Yeah,
and you only have 6 words.
Yeah, you just say something incendiary. But then I guess it's an interesting thing for the actual people who do the research, right? To try to make those zombie stats die. What is we all have an interest in knowing how bad trans suicide actually is, or suicide ideation, and then how bad domestic violence or rape actually is. Yeah. I don't know.
Okay. All right, Schrier, you're off the hook.
Let's talk about...
Now I just feel like you're going to shut down my next one as well.
Is that annoying?
You're going to fucking argue. Yeah, you're just going to argue with me about my next one.
I mean, aren't we trying to provide a nuanced debate for our listeners?
Fine, but if you could compliment sandwich me, that would be helpful. Okay?
Okay, sure. I'll try my best. You're allowed to respond, by the way. Like, you don't have to just...
I did. Next time I'm going to get quite aggressive, though. So
okay, cool. That's fine.
I don't see how you could have a problem with this one. Like, and if you do, I'm probably just going to hang up.
We've, by the way, skipped my chapter entirely, so quite a selfish...
Oh, sorry, go back. You talk about
very
your problems.
Selfish.
Is it about
let's just do all your things. I mean, that's fine.
Okay, good. Thank you. And then it should be time to wrap up anyway. So, chapter 8, the promoted and demoted.
It's like having sex with a man. It's No, carry on. We were on a roll, and we'll go back.
In the promoted and demoted, and she's talking about. I don't remember even what that chapter was about. Oh, I guess that might have been about Zucker, maybe, that chapter. But she's talking about, she's got some very robust commentary on pornography and how pornography harms young women, which I really like. And I'm always open to that being injected into anything. Yeah. But then she kind of further theorized in a way that I thought was a bit, anyway, I'll go into it. So the quote is, "The typical dating life available to girls today doesn't look half as great as it used to. Young women are intruded upon by biological men in locker rooms, trounced by biological boys on sports teams, and told that work life will never offer them fair rewards." Just to stop there, none of those things are dating.
This is a very scathing criticism, and I accept it.
Yeah. And then she goes on, "Intersectional language denies them all their biological specialness. Hollywood, no longer in the rom-com business, offers them no fantasy on which to hang their girlish hopes. Are girls transitioning because of the lack of rom-coms?"
Good. This actually does suggest a sort of more conservative attitude than I had been giving credit for, because that sounds a bit like girls should be girls, right? And it's the fact that we're confusing everyone by taking away femininity and masculinity, right? There's a little hint of that. Like, if we still had our like pretty pink princess type and our strong hunter-gatherer, maybe we would
We'd
not.
Be okay.
Yeah, how interesting. Yeah. I missed that. I totally disagree with you, by the way. I'm just trying to be kind because
okay,
you talk.
No,
I'm kidding.
I feel really good about myself. Sorry, just a little smile. Thank you. You loved this bit. You agree.
No, I agree with you.
No, I just thought, I mean, the stuff about biological specialness is a bit like, cringe, but okay, fine. I get what you mean. Like, I don't think that girls were ever high off biological specialness to begin with, but that's fine.
Yeah.
But yes, the no fantasy on which to hang their girlish hopes is very much a girls will be like should be girls, and
it is, yeah.
Fixating on romance is going to be the save all for young women and stop them from getting mastectomies.
Yeah.
Go to your chapter. I'm done.
Well, no, because I wanted to talk more about that view of the body that like, because I think we talked about this a bit while we were both reading, right? That like, there's a sense in which it can seem quite conservative to worry about girls getting double mastectomies. Like, I actually think that is a harm, and it's a harm in the sense of foreclosing future possibilities when you're not an adult enough to really make those decisions. But I know people who say, you know, who would run the line, like, there's this normative idea of what a female body should look like, but it's your body. If you want to get your breast chopped off, go ahead. Like, that's for you to decide. And in a way, that's transgressive, right? Because you're supposed to have the right kind of shape, or you're supposed to have boobs. So if you don't, you're doing something.
It does make me uncomfortable, and I've never been able to fully pinpoint why it does make me so uncomfortable. Like all of that discussion about mutilating young women's bodies and why that's bad, and like I just don't. I know if I woke up tomorrow and I woke up with a mastectomy, I mean, I'd be a bit baffled, but I wouldn't be bothered about my lack of boobs. Like, that wouldn't upset me in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. That's why I think that if we understand it in terms of, like, these people aren't even 18 yet, they can't vote, they can't blah, 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 or we don't know exactly when the brain fully matures, So maybe don't get a double mastectomy and a hysterectomy before such a time as you know for sure that you won't need to use that apparatus. Of course, then the libertarian view should kick in at a certain point. Like if you're 25 or 30 and you know for sure, and that's what you want for your body, no one else has the right to criticize that. So I think you're right that there are these moments where it looks like she's sort of got a very normative conception of femaleness or what females are for, or and she's a little bit reacting to like, oh, but your nice boobs will be gone, and like, oh, but you won't be able to have a baby, and it's
what
like
makes me so uncomfortable about it as well is like they're talking about like young women getting their breasts removed and it's the fixation on the maintenance of young women's breasts does make me uncomfortable. But I just sort of like it's a very strange, like, I mean, it's a thing we've been trying to get society to move away from fixating on, and yet we are continuing to fixate on it now for another reason. And it does, I don't know what the solution is, but it does sit in a poor place with me that
Well, there's that other stuff. There was another line, I can't remember what chapter it was in, but it was like describing all the effects of taking testosterone for a long time. So it was like enlarged clitoris, like lots of body hair on the face. And I think, I mean, one way to read that would be exactly the same. So it's like, again, who cares?
It gets me the same way.
But I also empathize with the thought that, like, if you are a detransitioner who's realized they made a mistake and wants to go back to being female and having relationships with females, maybe you do feel kind of really self-conscious and kind of humiliated, and you would kind of just want to not have those things. So it's not like it's crazy to bring it up that like maybe...
No, it's not at all. And on top of that, like I think it's safe to assume that people who pursue transition already have a reduced acceptance of their body. There's already the way that their body doesn't meet someone's, theirs, or other people's expectations, so they're also an enhanced vulnerability for feeling that same level of self-consciousness upon detransition. Like, I get it, I do get it. It just it does sit funny though.
I think we both had that experience, like just wanting to make sure it wasn't just that like normative control over women's bodies, but rather genuinely worrying about whether that's right for her. Because I think if that's the worry, I'm on board. But if it's like, no matter, like if she chose that, there's no way, like I hope she doesn't think there's no one who could rationally choose to have their breasts removed.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Or have a hysterectomy, or
Okay.
Should we do the joke from the start of The Shrinks? Doctor, she says, please help. My son thinks he's a chicken. The son says, if there's one thing I can tell you about chickens, it's that we know who we are. Where is your proof? The woman demands of her son. You have no feathers. True, the son replies. I went through the wrong puberty. The woman turns to the therapist. You see what I mean? He's lost his mind. The therapist replies, you're the one arguing with a chicken. This is her, do you remember it? Introduction.
I remember it, and I was just like, okay, yeah.
But it's interesting because it's like, that sets her up for then going on to argue that therapists are totally doing the wrong thing when they affirm trans people as the sex they identify with, because obviously it's like affirming the boy as a chicken.
I didn't make that connection. I immediately dismissed it as just being a bit cringe and moved on.
I mean, it's a bit cringe because she's like, oh, this absurdist joke, but she's saying that reveals this, that's the setup of the chapter. And then it's quite interesting because she goes into talking about, she gives two examples to try to like further make that point. One is if an anorexic feels fat, then you should call her fatty and like start talking to her about her liposuction options. And if a black kid feels white, you should affirm her as being really white and then start talking to her about like facial lightening creams. And of course it's easy for her in both of those cases, right, to explain why we shouldn't do either of those things because it's fucking racist or it's like going to lead to the person's death in the case of anorexia.
Sure.
Where's the line? Yeah, here it is. it's worth noting, so she's talking about affirmation, like we're always supposed to tell the trans person that they really are, and she says it's worth noting how different this is from being the parent of a gay adolescent. An adolescent who comes out as gay asks her parents to accept her for what she is. An adolescent who is transgender identified asks to be accepted for what she is not. And then I thought that parallel, like to what you are not, of course fits perfectly with the anorexic, the black girl, and the chicken.
Yeah.
Right? But there was also this interesting sense in which if that's how she's framing the problem, she's not actually talking to the gender identity people.
No.
Because it's not that they think we're telling those kids that they are what they are not in order to keep them from killing themselves. They're trying to shift the whole paradigm of what gender is, right? So that it really is the case that he is a woman, because what gender is subjective identity. So I found it really, I mean, this is not a criticism so much as just like I was just interested in how she used all these examples to position this thing that the clinicians are doing is like avoiding reality and agreeing with a delusion, but it wasn't really engaging with the gender identity stuff on its own terms and rejecting it on its own terms.
I felt that through the entire book, though. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that's certainly, it's true for most of it that she's not engaging with the gender identity arguments on their own terms, but also in that falls back, I think, to her position about, you know, her identity, her position as a mother, and talking about the well-being of kids and not showing an awful lot of empathy with the kids, because showing empathy with the kids would be about engaging with what the kids are saying, where they're at, and what they're consuming.
So what do you think about the strategy? Like, do you think it's kind of a sensible strategy because it has a scientific metaphysics and it just refuses any nonsense and it just speaks to the people who share that worldview? Or do you think it would have been a better book if she had have been able to articulate actually what the different worldview of the gender identity ideology stuff is and why it's wrong on its own terms?
It would have been a lot longer book.
Yeah, that's true.
For one, yes, that's a good book. When we're talking about what more could be done, that's a good book.
But you think it's another book?
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't have huge issues with that chapter. I thought that was kind of, you know, interesting, and those examples about, the racist one and the anorexic one, I mean, the stuff is obvious, you know, like they were just very concrete kind of binary little examples intended to set a point. That chapter didn't resonate with me much at all.
I guess I'm always thinking, like, if I tried to make that point in a talk, what would all of my audience say back in a scathing way? Which is, of course, that's the whole game in philosophy. And then there's too much to say back. Like, it just...
It was vapid. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not... it's just not... That's not what they mean. Like, so...
I felt that. I felt like... the trans activism argument was not steel-manned at any point through that book.
Exactly. The other thing that I thought I just wanted to sort of get your take on, I guess, was that she has this very passing mention of the David Reimer case. So do you remember that case? It was like, it's discussed in almost all of the
twins.
Exactly.
Yeah, the twins with the circumcision.
Yeah, so this like really famous case, and she explains how, or just maybe in case anyone watching doesn't know the case, so identical twins, one of them has a botched circumcision and then is reassigned as a girl. And then while he's successfully living as a girl, they think it's like they've won the nature over nurture debate, right? Because they've managed to just like, it's just all in how you treat people and how you socialize them. But then this person becomes like really boyish. And there's all these descriptions of like, oh, maybe it wasn't him. Anyway, various descriptions of how he's like uncomfortable and unhappy, and then at a certain point he's so depressed that his parents tell him the truth about his origin, and then he converts back to being a man. And this is on page 120. She's saying that trans activists often use the Reimer case to show that gender identity is immutable. So they think, well, Reimer obviously had a male gender identity, and then of course you couldn't just socialize him female, like that identity was always going to triumph. And then she says, what a kind of bizarre claim, because David Reimer was male. And maybe it's the biology that's triumphing, not this weird magical essence known as gender identity, which someone could have if they were female. Sorry, all of that was set up, which was just to say that case, like, because it's always focused on and then used in the discussions. But then Michael Bailey in the Man Who Would Be Queen book, he talks about these cases of, I'm probably not going to say it right, but I think it's cloacal extrophy, or maybe you say it somehow differently, but it's like this particular birth condition that boy babies get. And because there's so much like health risk associated with it, they tend to reassign those boys to female. And then there's a clinician at Johns Hopkins who has followed a cohort of those boys, like I think 14 of them, followed through like longitudinal studies, and roughly half of them 14 biological males, sex reassigned very early in life, like I think in the first weeks of life, and then raised and socialized as girls, not told by their families. And roughly half of that cohort spontaneously kind of told their parents they wanted to transition, or they felt like they were boys. But it's not all, it's half. So I just thought that was super interesting in the sense of like, we always concentrate on the Reimer case, but there's this other stuff that's probably like more of a nature-nurture experiment because it happens earlier in life. And then it shows that it's not the case that everyone obviously just has this really strong gender identity or has this really strong biology, because otherwise everyone would identify as men later on. But it also doesn't show that it's all, it doesn't show it's all socialization, because otherwise everyone would successfully stay girls. And I think that Bailey's thought is that actually these people would all be happier as boys because biology does triumph. So apparently of the people that stayed living as girls, one is a lesbian and has very masculine interests. So he, of course, he reads that as like is masculine in some sense. And then apparently I think 3 or 4 of the others are like unhappy in some ways, or like don't have many friends, or are depressed. And one was called Cave Woman during school because she was so like ungraceful. Sure. So you get a sense of these like biological maleness kind of being visible and obvious.
Yeah.
I just think it's so interesting because it's like it sort of shows it's not one or the other, but then is it more of one or the other? And like the case just doesn't show what anyone thinks it shows. Just,
I mean, the unhappiness associated with those things that you just talked about there, I mean, that's gender, like that they're talking, you know, they're unhappy because of like, you know, gender stereotypes imposed on females, which they're meant to be. So because they're more male, like, and that's not.
But why are they masculine in the first, like, so I think
why are they masculine in the first place? I know literally nothing about like their social environments or like.
What I mean is like if your point is look, there's just a lot of variation in how to be female, and some females are more masculine and they get picked on, and we should just think of all these boys as being like that. Is that your point? Because I think Bailey would just say, yeah, but this one really is male, and that's probably part of the explanation for why she's being called Cave Woman, because she's expressing something biological, she's not just a masculine female. She's not a female at all, right?
Yeah, I don't know how cavey she looked though. I don't know. I just like I'm finding it hard to engage with that because I don't know more about it.
I guess it's just like a sort of abstract question about like what, like, does anyone get, if you get a case like this that's like, oh, well, there was a boy and they tried to raise him as a girl, but he knew he was a boy and he switched back. And then it's like, is that a victory for gender identity? Is it a victory for biology?
Yeah, neither.
Is it a victory?
Yeah, I do wonder about it though. Like I do wonder about that case and like the identification with maleness and like, you know, is there the knowledge that one is male and that is that evidence, is that evidence of cis and trans, and and how that works in those like intersex cases.
Exactly.
And I don't know the answer. Yeah.
Like if he's right, if Bailey's right that even out of all of these 14 boys reassigned as girls, they all would have been happier as boys, that somehow would have been more comfortable, or that looks to me like a strong weight on the scales for some biological sense of oneself. But then I don't know, does that mean we shouldn't be transitioning anyone? Because actually everyone would be more happy living as the sex they are, so it goes against the trans narrative? Or does it mean some people could still have like body integrity identity disorder and that would disrupt like, so there's lots of fake trans, but there's still some real trans, and I just feel confused by like what all of these cases show, I guess.
I agree. I agree. And I've thought about posting about it and getting people to argue about it, so I can sit there and look at what they say and try and develop an opinion, because I don't know, and I've thought about it a lot, because I don't think it is evidence of gender identity per se, but I don't know.
But if it's evidence of sex, like we somehow do know our sex, or there's ways we end up feeling or acting, or small ways of expressing or whatever that are actually biological, not socialized, then I guess the question would that just seems like a reason why everyone should live in their own body, like that. And then the question is just going to be, is there something in the vicinity of trans like this, parallel to the wanting to get your limb amputated? Like, is there something like that would disrupt this biological thing? It's not gender identity. I think that whole narrative is stupid, but there is is there something that can intervene on this like biological knowing or being more comfortable? I don't know.
What else could be done? Last bit. What more could be done? So I think we should start with that Schrier's solution at the end of the book was to don't let your kids go on social media or give them smartphones.
Yeah, I liked that.
You liked that?
Oh, just because I've read so much independently about how terrible social media is, like Jonathan Haidt's work. Yeah, and just like how bad it seems to be for girls independently on feminist grounds, like just learning all this sexualized stuff and then performing it and seeing yourself as this like popularity contest, and I don't know. Yeah,
it's probably not good. I agree. That was her solution. More books / audiobooks on this general topic. Producing more books and audiobooks in general, I think, is a really positive thing that can be done. There's an awful lot of Medium articles out there. There's a lot of Twitter threads. There's memes, and there's all sorts of stuff. But having books on this topic out there, not this topic specifically, but in this on the gender wars or any aspect within it, I think is of value. I do appreciate that there is a real difficulty getting published on this topic, particularly if you are a known TERF. So I guess what works for Abigail or Schrier is that she is an established author who is out there, and she is not a TERF, I guess. I mean, she would certainly be labelled as a TERF, but that's not her political position. And I guess what efforts could be made to appeal to authors or investigative journalists or or people of all political positions, or not all of them, but some political positions, to take an interest in this, I guess.
Yeah.
I know that John Ronson is out. He has Twitter wars with like Graham Linehan.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I guess we just need, like, if the question is how to combat the transing of girls that aren't trans, it's like it's going to be such a big patchwork solution, right? Like way more people hearing about it, and then maybe just everything will help. Like, more audiobooks, more real books, more academic research, more TED Talks, more podcasts, more memes, more
stuff.
Anything. Like everyone who has the safety of a platform where they can speak up and not get fired, just fucking speak. Like, I guess that's the just everyone do what they can, and then hope that eventually the stuff stops. Yeah.
I thought that the exploration on detransition could go further. I did say I think this was a bit of a limitation on the book, although I appreciate that it's a hard population to reach. But I think she literally only interviewed the peak resilience girls, right?
Yeah, maybe that's right. I can't quite remember. Dagny, yeah.
They were only, so, I mean, for me, that's a shortcoming. And again, if you were an open-minded trans activist reading the book, that would be an easy way to dismiss it. If you're only reading people that are like anti-ROGD activists who happen to be detransitioners, like that's a limitation. Like there are plenty of detrans out there who have a lot of interesting things to say on the topic, who aren't who are various types of activists of various things, or not activists at all. You know, there are people who detransition very quietly.
Yeah.
There are detransitioners that are suffering. You know, like there's lots of more on that topic that could be explored that I would be very interested in reading a book about. You know, and hearing those human stories.
Yeah. I mean, maybe this is just more of an academic interest than like what would advance the political debate, but for me, the kind of content that is missing everywhere is genuine engagement between the sides. So there's just nothing where like a smart trans activist or trans person will actually kind of discuss the ideas or try to find ways for the two very different worldviews to communicate, or see if there are any rational common goals that would make us allies. Like that whole discussion is missing because we're just like evil bigots who you can't be in the same room as, and that whole politics just gets in the way of any constructive discussion.
The young ones are doing it.
Are they talking to each other?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in lots of Facebook groups that are hands across the aisle in that regard, I guess.
But really like trans activists and gender critical feminists.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, really? Yes.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know of that. I'm sincerely...
No, it's definitely out there. And those groups do tend to go to shit after a while, but, like, they're definitely out there. And there is a lot of it. But, yeah, you kind of realize through those discussions there are some just, like, fundamental disagreements that are so impossible to get beyond.
Yeah.
But in general, like, there are... I can add you to some of those groups if you would like.
Well, I don't really want to be in a Facebook group, but I want content, right? Do you know if anyone's collaborating on...
No.
Like writing something together or doing YouTube channels?
I doubt it's going that far, but the young ones are up to it. So maybe when they're a bit older, they'll be doing that.
Yeah, I hope so. Because I think that's the thing that would really help. Like people who are willing to commit to sort of keeping a professional relationship, even if they don't like each other, and then somehow bringing that discussion to people, right? Like through some media channel, whatever that is. That would be great to see. So, yeah.
Targeting the audience. So I think when you were talking earlier about targeting like the adolescents, the ones that are at risk, targeting them, there's more work that could be done in that space. So memes are a good start. What about non-cringe adolescent literature, you know, about detrans?
Oh yeah, good.
Or desisting, you know, like literature and books on that, you know, like but there's got to be non-cringe, man. It's got to be like authentic. It'd almost have to be like autobiographical, I think, or
just representation, right? Like a Netflix show that has a detransitioner as the main character. Like I agree with you that it would be great if we just got all forms of media.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which ones are you going to take responsibility for?
None. What about you? You're going to do memes.
Yeah, I need to get back to making memes. It's just so hard. I feel like it's all been said, you know, like how many memes can you make?
So I'm going to
end talking to you. Thanks so much for shutting down all of my really amazing points about why the book wasn't good.
That's my job. That I'm very well trained in that. It's been about 25 years of training. So you're welcome. Anytime.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been
in feeling confident, and now I feel like a little bit nervous, unsure of myself.
I should just mention that last time we talked, remember, you told me that it was quite stressful talking to me.
That's true.
Now
it continues to be true. Yeah.
There'll be no more collabs, everyone. This was a one-time thing.
Yeah.